Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
I've been asking for this fight. You are so full of shit. What have I done to show you that I don't want this fight? I gave you a side because you wouldn't take the fight any other way.
That's a lie. That's a lie. You didn't give me a side.
I gave you a side because the fight wouldn't have happened.
In the meeting said Sanisa
the fight wouldn't have happened. The fight wouldn't have happened. The fight wouldn't have happened. The fight wouldn't have happened because you didn't want to take the fight. You didn't want to take the fight.
I can't even talk because she just keeps talking with your fake ass lips. Bye.
No, you make. Oh, now you're gonna get off? Get off. Scary ass.
Ow! Things are heating up and they're heating up fast. I fucking told you they don't like each other. I told you. So just imagine what the aesthetic is going to be once both girls are in the ring opposite each other. Fight's going down on the undercard for Canelo versus Kovalev, and here we have both Marlen Esparza and Senicia Estrada in a verbal exchange that I've no doubts is going to be a parallel for what the action inside of the ring is going to look like. You know, what they're discussing is basically the nuts and bolts as far as what it took to make the fight a reality. That Marlen Esparza, at least according to Marlen, she had to acquiesce to being the B-side because Senicia wouldn't have took the fight any other way. In truth, regardless of what both of them are saying, I think both of them want the fight. I think both of them want the fight bad enough that A sides and B sides, that doesn't even come into it. Both girls want to kick the other girl's ass. And the beauty of it is, regardless of who wins the fight, you know, yeah, there's going to be bragging rights for the victor, as, you know, to the victor go the spoils. But in truth, the loser of the fight, nothing to be ashamed of, you know, they can bounce back from it. I just so happen to think that Senicia Estrada has everything it takes to win this fight. I don't think that Marlen has amassed enough professional experience that she's going to win this thing. I don't. But, you know, you never know. I could be wrong. I mean, I was wrong about Vosdick and Better Beef. Who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong about this. But regardless of me being right or wrong, and regardless of who wins and who loses, the thing is, whoever loses the fight, you know, it's not the end of the world. You can bounce back. I mean, Bernard Hopkins, he lost his first professional fight. Henry Armstrong, he lost 3 of his first 10 fights. Went on to become an all-time great. So, you know, there's a lot on the line in this fight in terms of bragging rights. But losing this thing, it's not the end of the world. Whoever loses, they can bounce back. I just can't wait to see it because, like I said, these two girls, they don't like each other. And in those lighter weights...
Flyweight.
The fighters often throw a lot of punches. You get a lot of barn burners. You get a lot of high-octane matches. But just imagine how much more it adds to it, how much more fuel to the fire there is when the two combatants don't even like each other. Relevant particulars in association with this matchup is that this fight is for the WBA's interim championship in the flyweight division. Thus, whoever wins, whether it's Marlen or Senicia, the victor's going to be that much closer to challenging Naoko Fujioka for what is the full-fledged WBA title in the flyweight division. The flyweight division where Nicola Adams just so happens to be the WBO champion. So you can more or less see where I'm going with this. That whoever wins this fight, they'll go on to challenge Naoko for the WBA title. And should they win, they can thereby unify with Nicola Adams in what could be a sizable fight of some value. I will say that I am a little disappointed that this fight is happening at flyweight as opposed to light flyweight, where Jessica Tutibap holds the full version of the WBA title. I have to say that Jessica would pose more resistance to either one of these two girls, Marlen or Senicia. Jessica would be a stiffer test for either one of them than Naoko. Naoko Fujioka, who was last in action this past August against Tenkai Tsunami. Naoko Fujioka, who fought to a draw against Tenkai Tsunami. And you gotta understand that Naoko's 44 years old. You know, so you put it together. A 44-year-old defending champion against some young upstart who's got a fresh set of legs, fresh set of reflexes, throws a lot of punches. What do you think happens if either Senicia or Marlen challenge her for that WBA title? I have to say that I would have given Jessica Tutibap better odds to be able to hang on to her title than Naoko, because Naoko, she's been around the block, she's seen a lot of winners, and I think Father Time is starting to catch up with her. I mean, 44 years old fighting? Jesus Christ. My hat goes off to her for being a reigning and defending champion, but in truth, regardless of who wins this fight,
she's in trouble.
Between Marlen and between Senicia, I don't give Naoko very good odds against either combatant, against either fighter, regardless of what the outcome is. Don't be surprised if after this fight is over, Naoko Fujioka so decides to call it a career, retires, and vacates the title. I could definitely see that happening. I wouldn't even hold it against her if she did. I mean, she's 44 years old. There's only so much you can ask of a person. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how things work out, if that's what happens once a victor is determined in the case of Esparza versus Estrada. Now, if Naoko so decides to try to defend that title against the winner of this fight, well, I don't think that's going to bode too well for her either. One way or another, I can see Marlene unseating Naoko, and I could see Sinicia unseating Naoko. So for now, just keep your eyes peeled for Estrada versus Esparza, November 2nd, on the undercard of Canelo versus Kovalev.
Being as though he was elevated to franchise standpoint, how do we get it undisputed now? Because he was waiting for the winner of Comey and Teofimo to become undisputed and having unification in that division. By being franchised, he can't be undisputed.
He is undisputed because the franchise champion represents the WBC. He is a world champion of the WBC. I understand.
But you can't lose that status. In your rules, it says that the franchise can't lose. So if he fights in the IBF with all the belts, quote unquote undisputed, the WBC franchise is on the line. He loses. He doesn't lose the franchise, and he can't give the title to the champion according to your rules.
It is a non-transferable situation.
So how is it undisputed?
It is undisputed. It is undisputed.
With no belt? It's
Look,
a little confusing,
look,
right?
it is confusing. I don't want to get into it because you have your mind completely set on something.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
It's. Can you believe that there's instant replay in football?
There's instant replay.
20 years ago, there was a tremendous move against everything that had to be technology. You have to move on to the times. People want to see the best fight happen. Lomachenko wants to fight the best challenge possible. And we are permitting through the franchise champion to go and fight other champions, to go and fight other divisions, to take on whatever is the biggest challenge. Same as Canelo.
I'm not trying to be a nuisance, but your rankings indicate the number one is the best available, especially to the title. Now you're not letting the number one fight the champion.
They can fight the champion.
So when does Haney or Jamal fight the two champions?
Haney is the champion of the WBC.
He's been elevated.
Yes, so he won the title against Abdullayev.
But not.
We're gonna get nowhere.
I'm
done. I'm done.
Can't believe it.
I want to go ahead and give Nesta Gibbs of the Boxing Voice a shout out and a hats off for asking the hard questions to Mauricio Sulaiman in regards to this franchise move, what it really means, and how it creates an uneven playing field for anyone who's not a WBC franchise champion. I want to go ahead and give Ness a shout out, a hats off, and a nickname. He's gone from Nestor Gibbs to Elliot Ness for getting to the bottom of the corruption, getting to the truth that Mauricio Sulaiman can't resolve the WBC's own logic when asked the hard questions. That if the winner of Comey versus Lopez were to square off against Vasyl Lomachenko's WBC title, it's not transferable, and in that way, it's not actually an undisputed title fight. I know what you're gonna say, that nobody actually beat Vasyl Lomachenko and took his green belt from him, so why wouldn't it be an undisputed title fight? Well, it's because Vasyl Lomachenko's not actually bringing a green belt for the other guy to win. His status as a franchise champion, whatever kind of WBC champion he is, whatever kind of status he has, it's not transferable to the other guy. The only one of these guys with a transferable belt that the other guy can win would have to be Devin Haney. So in that way, Devin Haney is actually the WBC's world champion in the lightweight division because Vasyl Lomachenko don't got a green belt for anybody to win. And in essence, what the WBC has done is shortchanged Vasyl Lomachenko by depriving him of the opportunity to be in a full-fledged, undisputed title fight because it's not an even playing field. And the same is true in the case of Canelo Alvarez. Anybody interested in winning a green belt from him, it'll be to their chagrin that they can't actually win one from him. They cannot unseat him as the WBC franchise champion. You can't beat him and become that. So in that way, what kind of champion is a franchise champion, really?
Not a champion at all.
And look, I don't say this to berate Vasyl Lomachenko. I don't even say this to berate Canelo Alvarez. But at the end of the day, the truth is the truth. That they have awarded a status to both of these fighters that cannot be won in combat, and that contradicts the very essence of the sport of boxing. That, you know, you beat a champion to be a champion, except in this case, you fucking can't. And I don't even think this is the last we're going to see of this franchise, French fry, whatever crap. There are rumors swirling that Deontay Wilder, he may be elevated to franchise champion. And given how he navigates his career, in all honesty, I could see it happening. That if Deontay Wilder still is world champion by the time February 2021 rolls around, when Dillian White is supposed to be eligible to challenge him, I could very much see the WBC elevating him to franchise, and he'd never have to fight Dillian White thereafter. That is a genuine possibility if Deontay Wilder can hang on to the green belt for that duration of time, for that long. And who knows, maybe they elevate him to that status before February 2021 rolls around. I mean, we see that members of the boxing media actually asking Mauricio Suleiman the hard questions, and he's offered up little more than football analogies that don't actually apply. Boxing does not need this. Boxing does not need this the way that a couple of years ago, a couple of decades ago, football needed an instant replay. That is not an accurate parallel. That does not encompass this situation. The function of a franchise champion is no service to the sport of boxing. If anything, it's a disservice to the sport of boxing, because any franchise champion can skip out on guys that climbed up the ranks looking to fight them, and any franchise champion is, they can't actually be an undisputed champion, because a franchise champion isn't bringing a green belt for the other guy to win. Trying to understand that this is not about levying criticism towards Vasyl Lomachenko, but there's definitely something to be addressed here when supposedly he can become an undisputed champion, but the winner of Comey versus Lopez cannot. And I know what you're thinking. That you probably figured that regardless of which one of those two guys ends up fighting Loma's gonna beat him anyway. Whether it's Richard Comey or Teofimo Lopez, you figured, well, it doesn't really matter if they can't become undisputed champions because I had Loma winning the fight anyway. But you know why it does matter? Because it's an asterisk. Okay, the only guy with a physical representation of the green belt that anyone can win, that's at stake whenever that fighter has a fight. Now it's Devin Haney. And, that wasn't Devin Haney's decision. That was the WBC's decision. So in many ways, at least from where I'm sitting, it looks like Vasyl Lomachenko can't truly consider himself an undisputed champion, or the fans might not, some of them, they might not, until he fights Devin Haney. Because as it stands, the WBC has made Devin Haney the only titleist with a belt that someone can go in there and win. And what's even stranger about this situation is, let's say that Vasyl Lomachenko and Devin Haney fight sometime next year in 2020. You know what happens? Based on the WBC's bylaws, I believe the way the cookie would crumble is that the title that Devin Haney is holding would go vacant.
What?
It would go vacant.
What?
And then somebody else could come along and pick it up. I mean, what the fuck has the WBC done to the lightweight division, and what have they done to the sport of boxing?
The corruption is at an all-time high. Powers that be are working clandestinely to service themselves and their agenda, their ulterior motives, and this corruption must be fought, addressed. Awareness must be made that the WBC is attempting to fragment deliberately the weight classes and what champions are there, preventing the necessary unification matches that would establish a fight.
You're always hearing people saying that the green belt is the most prestigious out of all the belts in the sport of boxing, but these guys that say this can never seem to characterize as to why that is, because the WBC is not the oldest of the alphabet titles. That would actually be the WBA, and given the WBC's business practices, does this seem prestigious to you? Is this prestigious? This kind of a move? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think so. And I think it's about time that people took a good long look at the WBC and started asking, does boxing need the WBC? Now, it being that Devin Haney stands here today as a world titleist, there are some names that are already beginning to line up in contention for what is his newly obtained world title. The winner of Cuellar versus Fortuna may get a crack at the WBC World Champion, and just as well, Luke Campbell wants to be the first to defeat and unseat Devin Haney. What do I think about these fights? I think these are all fantastic fights that make a lot of sense for Devin Haney. I mean, they really do. These are the kind of guys that are going to test his resolve, test his mettle, pose some resistance in all the ways that a young up-and-comer, well, now a world champion.
Yeah, pretty much.
In all the ways that are necessary for him to become a more well-rounded fighter with tough experiences to draw from in the future. I particularly like the idea of Devin Haney versus Luke Campbell. I mean, that's a fantastic fight. Titillating kind of match. I'll say that Luke Campbell's amateur background, the fact that he's a gold medalist, and his professional experiences, the fact that he's been in there with the likes of a Jorge Linares, a Vasyl Lomachenko, these kinds of experiences that he brings to the table are what could see him troubling Devin Haney more so than anyone Devin Haney has fought so far, because Devin Haney, for all his virtues, he doesn't have the best resume. Now, I don't expect him to have the best resume because up until recently, he just hit contender status. I don't expect this kid to have fought the Godzillas and King Kongs of the lightweight division already. But now that he's a world champion, that's what's going to be asked of him. He's going to have to fight those kinds of fighters, defend his belt and or unify it, you know. I mean, well, unifying, I don't even know. That's another story for another day. Better still, a guy like Luke Campbell, yeah, that's a fantastic fight for Devin Haney. I'll say that I don't know if that fight should be billed as a pay-per-view over there in the UK because, well, they just asked the boxing community over there in the UK to pay for the Lomachenko versus Campbell fight. I believe that was a pay-per-view. Thus, Luke Campbell having lost that fight, I'm not sure that that's a fight that should be billed as a pay-per-view. You know, Haney versus Campbell. I will say, however, that most of the value, you know, if you wanted to turn over a profit with that fight, it would be better suited over there in the UK as opposed to over here in the US. And it's the same principle as the Lomachenko fight, that the boxing community over there, they definitely know Luke Campbell. They know him 100%. And I'm sure that they're more aware of Haney over there in the UK as opposed to the boxing community over here in the US that really only knows a handful of names. You know, you gotta understand, the American market is a really tough market, full of guys that got short attention spans, and unless you're a huge name, odds are they don't know who you are. But over there in the UK, I could very much see Devin Haney and Luke Campbell filling up an arena like the O2 Arena. Yeah, I think that there would be genuine intrigue for a matchup like that. You know, you could sell some tickets. So, I mean, the bottom line here is that even though Devin Haney didn't get the much desired Vasyl Lomachenko fight that he was working towards, there are still good fights out there for him. And he's going to have challengers now. He's going to have guys that are knocking on his door because those guys know, well, you won't get a Lomachenko fight unless he picks you. Whereas in the case of Devin Haney, he's subject to mandates. He's subject to mandatories. Thus, guys are going to start lining up to test Devin Haney's mettle. And I hope he's ready for it, because it's coming.